And what we want to talk about now are relationships, specifically people who live with mental illness, being in relationships with people who don't live with mental illness. I've been married 3 times. That's kind of how this came up. I've been in a lot of relationships, and 2/3 of them have failed. I've been in a lot of marriages, and 2/3 of them has failed. Vin, what's your number? How are your marriages running?
2.
And how many of them are still around?
Neither of them. So this leads me to wonder, is it more difficult for people to be involved with somebody who is mentally ill versus somebody who isn't? I think the obvious answer to that is, well, yeah. What are your thoughts?
First off, I think that being mentally ill makes everything more difficult.
Right.
And since romantic relationships are, contained within everything, yeah. When I'm depressed, I can't get out of bed. And if I have trouble making it from the bedroom to the bathroom, then, meeting the basic requirements of being a romantic partner are...
Yeah. It makes it tough.
It does make it tough, but people have done it. I'm coming up on 6 years happily married. And those are the whole 6. Like there's no joke coming at the other end. We've been together for 10, happily for 6. I don't have that, but I do have the bad relationships and bad, not good, ended in divorce because I just didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't capable of living in my own skin, let alone being available for somebody else.
So I think what we ought to do today is try to offer some suggestions to people who are not mentally ill about how to better handle the relationships with somebody who is.
I'm glad you brought this up because I talked to all the non-mentally ill people in my life, and this is what she said. My wife does not live with bipolar disorder like myself, and I met her when I was well into recovery. And I think that this is one of the keys to success for us. I took care of my own needs first. I was stable. I was in recovery. I had something to offer other than I'm not living very well. And by the time she met me, she didn't see all of the difficulties that I had been through, which is a bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, she saw me for who I am at my core. I'm a person who loves, art and music and television and sports. But on the other hand, I kind of feel like, would she have wanted to marry me if she would have seen me, at my worst? And if I become my worst self again, is she going to run off? Like,
right.
What would that look like?
And I know this isn't really on point here, but as you've said, you've been married 3 times.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting array because in your first marriage, you were completely undiagnosed.
Completely
undiagnosed. And so that relationship ended as one might expect. Your second marriage, you were diagnosed, but just at the very beginning stages of being treated, right?
Yeah, she's the one that took me to the hospital.
Right.
Without her, she figured out that there was something wrong. Pardon my French, but I thought I was just I'm going to say butthole. I thought that I was just frankly a bad person. This is what most of the people around me believed, that I was just, an emotional wreck, unreliable, and couldn't be trusted. We didn't realize there was any disease process involved at all. I thought wanting to die was, just normal because of how bad I was. She recognized that was, she recognized that was abnormal.
Imagine.
I know. And then we got married, which interestingly enough, she saved my life. We got married. So that's like a romantic story, right? Yeah. It turns out there's 2 things that are universally true. Being married to an untreated bipolar, not good. And being married to a newly treated bipolar who is not in control of his illness,
not much
also
better.
Not good.
Right.
My life really is a 3rd times the charm. I was diagnosed and I was in control of my own illness. But I still have to go back and say, I'm still waiting on this marriage to end. And part of that is anxiety. Mm-hmm. Part of that is previous trauma. But I do have to wonder, Vin, you were there when I was sick. I've known you a very long time. and you knew me when I was at my worst. So the fact that we're still friends is comforting because you've seen me at my worst, you've seen me at my best, and you have made a decision to stick around. But the people that never saw me at my worst, I wonder if they'd stick around.
Well, being on the other side of the country makes it easier to stick around. So.
And we're not in a romantic relationship. I mean, if I blow all my money, fall apart, and sleep under a bridge, I'm not going to take you down with me. So it's not completely fair, which is one of the reasons that we're talking about romantic relationships specifically. Right. And we're not talking about like friendships or family members. My wife is linked to me, as goes Gabe, as goes Kendall, for better, for worse. I think that's in the vows.
I've heard that.
You have?
Yeah, a couple of times. I beat you to that joke.
So I did. Right. I sat down with Kendall in preparation for this show, and I asked her a lot of questions. And one of the first things that came up, with all respect to previous relationships, is I was very, very mentally ill when I got married the first time. But in reality, my ex, she wasn't doing so great in the mental health department either. If you weigh 300 pounds and you want to be thin, find a 500-pound guy to stand next to. So we both were very young. We both had mental health problems. I was just sicker and more out of control. So neither one of us were really in a position to help the other. And this was detrimental for both of us and has left both of us with some, lingering relationship trauma. That, I'm sure she's not thrilled to have to deal with. And I feel horrific for laying at her doorstep. By the time my second marriage came along, I had regrets, but I don't know. It was very, very different. But the one thing that we didn't do, and I'm friends, longtime listeners of the podcast have heard her on the show. Mm-hmm. We're still friends because we understood how to work together to manage mental illness. But we didn't put any time, energy, and attention to all the other parts of marriage. We handled the mental health part great.
So that's half the battle.
If I've learned nothing else from being, unsuccessfully married twice and successfully married once, it's that there are no shortcuts. Living with mental illness just added on more work. It didn't take any work away. All of the basics of being in a romantic relationship still apply. I still have to put her needs ahead of my own. She still needs to put my needs ahead of hers. We need to have compromise. We need to have similar values. We need to work together as a team. We need to decide, basic things like, where to live and how to spend money. None of that goes away. We just had to add work. And the work that we had to add was, Gabe is mentally ill. How did you find it in your relationships? Because I've known you a long time, Vin. You had kind of a similar situation.
My first marriage, I was diagnosed, but untreated. And I was still in that stupid phase where I thought I didn't need external help, that I could do it all within myself, which was utterly wrong. And that was my bad. And also telling her to just chill and let me handle it on my own was also my bad. So clearly, that was a recipe for disaster. In the second one, I had by that point I'd had some treatment, but still was not on antidepressants, which I should have been, and so still had its own set of issues there. So yeah, I haven't done number 3 yet. Now that I am on antidepressants, I should probably get married again. Is that what you're trying to get at?
It worked out for me. And on that note, while we're at break, if everybody could think of all their single friends for Vincent M. Wales, the famous author and podcaster.
Welcome back, everyone. We're talking about mental illness within relationships. And now that we've discussed all the bad aspects of it, what advice can we give to the non-mentally ill half of the relationship in order to make things better for the two of them?
So it's like a 1-2 punch. The first thing is I have to be completely honest with the person that I'm in the relationship with. I have to tell her everything. I don't get any credit for, hiding what I'm going through, hiding my symptoms, hiding my illness. And then what they need to do is accept that at face value. They need to ask. Yeah. Right. They need to ask appropriate follow-up questions. They need to educate themselves about that illness.
Educating is a big one. That is a really big one, I think. And it's not just educating in terms of, the clinical side of things. It's also educating about how that illness affects their partner specifically. Not just in the big, grand, okay, here's what bipolar disorder means in a clinical sense, but what does it mean for Gabe? How does it affect Gabe? So it needs to be a very personal kind of education.
And that personal education has to be a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that my wife and I have done is I tell her what I need, and she doesn't follow blindly. And I really think that's the key. I don't just get to say, hi, I live with bipolar disorder, so I get to choose dinner tonight. It doesn't work that way.
Never, not even once. Did you try it?
I have, and you're actually correct. I'm kind of glad that you made the tongue-in-cheek joke, because if I said that, which I have, I really need to go to this place and sit in the back. I'm just, maybe like on a vacation, or maybe when there's a lot going on or a lot of commotion, and she really, really wants the different restaurant. But because I don't pull that card often, because we're perfectly honest with each other, and she looks at me and she's like, okay, Gabe's hit a wall. He wants this comforting escape at, Pizza Hut or whatever. I don't pull that out every time. So she knows I mean it. And that's on me. But what's on her is she can't just let me get away with murder because I play the bipolar disorder card. Right. It doesn't work that way. So she had to educate herself enough about my illness to know when to push back and when not to. And that can be done in a million different ways. Okay, maybe a million's an exaggeration, but there are definitely more than 5. She did research on the internet. She took a class through a local support group. She went to a caregiver support group. She has asked me endless questions over the 6 years that we've been together. She's talked to the people around me. She's talked to other people that live with bipolar disorder. She's listened to shows like this so that she can understand what it means. And then finally, she's been willing to make mistakes. And that's the big one. If I give her credit for anything, it's that she's been willing to make mistakes, because it's in those mistakes that we've learned together. And finally, oh my God, does she forgive me for all the mistakes that I've made and will no doubt make in the future? Because that's what marriage is. It's not about not making mistakes. It's not about not arguing. It's about working together to get to that, I don't know, blissful marriage in the sky.
Okay.
Stuff is always in the sky.
In the sky.
In the sky.
I hear there's pie there.
So then you're single. And I know that you want to be in a relationship because we've discussed it before. Mm-hmm. What are your hopes for your partner? Like, what do you want them to know and understand? How do you want them to enter the relationship so that you have the best odds of, making number 3 work?
It's kind of a timely question right now too, because I've been out on a few dates with somebody and we're still doing that. So it hasn't ended yet, but lately, this past week has been a pretty bad one for me, depression-wise. And, since I don't live with this person, she's not really seeing it. I might, in the course of texting with her during the day, I might say, yeah, it's kind of a crummy day. The depression is winning today, that kind of thing. But that's not the same as her experiencing it. So I do have fears. It scares the crap out of me that somebody that I would potentially be with might see that, just like you've indicated, and it makes them run off. So, yeah, I would certainly want them to do what we've been saying is, the education and being understanding, and of course, being patient is a big one too. But, you don't want them to go to the extreme either. You don't want them to become like your babysitter. Helpful is one thing, but being, the constant, is there anything I can do? What do you need? That kind of thing all the time is just, that's too much as well.
Yeah. You just described my second marriage. Again, as I stated, we did a great job, me and my second wife, of managing bipolar disorder, of managing the mental health system, of getting me the help that I needed in order to become, well. And I am so thankful for her. And it's why we're still friends. But we put absolutely nothing, as you just said, into the marriage. Mm-hmm. All there was her being my caregiver. There was nothing else. And that was problematic. So to the listeners out there, if your entire relationship is about your mental illness, you need to expand. You need to get a hobby.
Another thing that that is important for them to keep in mind is that, some days will be better than others. I've been having a kind of bad time recently, but it'll get better because it always does. So yes, some days will be better than others. There will be bad days. Just expect that and be flexible, be ready for it.
And from our perspective, the people that we love are going to have bad days too. They
Sure.
may not be related to mental illness, but listen, as much as I love my wife and as much as my wife is free from, severe and persistent mental illness, yeah, she still gets grumpy. She still has bad days at work. She still,
Sure.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
We all have to tolerate things from our loved ones. And this is a good segue into another point that we as people living with mental illness need to understand. Sometimes our significant others are going to need breaks.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If you are a caregiver of any sort, whether it's for, somebody that you are literally being a caregiver for physically because they're, infirm, or just being with somebody who is mentally ill, you need yourself. You need your time for yourself. You got to take care of yourself in order to be able to better tend to other people. That's just.
I think the phrase that you're looking for is that you can't pour from an empty cup.
Well, I wasn't looking for that, but yeah, that works.
And it's important to understand in your relationship that the person you're in a relationship with isn't your caregiver. They might do caregiving tasks, just like if my wife has surgery, I am going to be her caregiver to get through the surgery. I don't consider Kendall my caregiver. I consider her my partner. And as my partner, sometimes she needs to help care for me because I am managing a long-term illness. So that's good. If you look to your significant other to do all the work for you, you've created an imbalance in your relationship. And if you are looking at your mentally ill partner and thinking, oh, I have to take care of you because you can't take care of yourself, then you've created an imbalance in your relationship. And I think it's very, very important to understand that because good relationships are based on a semblance of equality.
Very well said. It's what I was trying to say, but you said it better. That's why I'm a writer and not a speaker.
Vin, that is excellent. In 20 minutes, we're not going to be able to discuss everything that has to do with living with mental illness and being in a romantic relationship. I don't think we could cover that in 20 days. But the things that we need to take the time to realize is that romantic relationships are a partnership. And if the two of you aren't working together, then you're going to find yourself working against each other. And once you start working against each other, your relationship is almost positively going to fail or become extremely codependent, which maybe we should cover in another episode there, Vin.
Yeah, that's certainly doable.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And remember, you can get 1 week of convenient, affordable, private online counseling absolutely free, anytime, anywhere, just by visiting betterhelp.com/psychcentral. We'll see everyone next week.
Thank you for listening